Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today. We're going to take a look at the parts classification capabilities of Windchill PLM. My name is Rob Romanowski. I'm the Director of Sales Operations with 3HTI, and leading our presentation overview and demo is Andrea Francis with PTC's Virtual Center of Excellence. So if you have any questions, feel free to type those in. We'll try to answer them as we go through the webinar, but we will definitely answer all questions at the end. This should be about no more than 20 minutes. This is relatively pretty quick and simple. So Andrea, without further ado, take it away.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome everybody. So, like Rob said, my name is Andrea Francis. I'm with PTC. I work as a solutions consultant, and today we're going to go through parts classification inside of Windchill. Really exciting stuff. So, to get things started, I think we're going to start from the standpoint as to why would you even consider classifying components into your PDM or your PLM systems. So, what we see today with our customers, a lot of people that are either newly adopting Windchill or they have been users of the tool for decades on end because Windchill has been around for years now. How do we improve onto the way that we do product data management? How can we reuse components much more easily? How do we not have to get our engineering team searching long times for stuff, especially if we have lots of data inside of the system? And you can think of it as well, if you don't have a PDM or a PLM system today, what do you have? Do you use something like a SharePoint or a OneDrive, a file explorer that you share out throughout the teams? Do you have your own homegrown system? Do you have struggles where you find information, first of all? And if you don't find that information, then what do you do? Do you go and create a new part? Do you try to duplicate something that you already have and kind of tailor it to what you need? There's a lot of issues with that. Whether you have a PDM or PLM or you don't have one at all, recreating models is not always fun. And if you have a PDM or a PLM system, having duplicate components that are exactly the same is also not fun because, first of all, it takes time to create new components, whether it's just creating a copy of something and then assembling it in. You don't track where those components are used. And if you're managing duplicate components, that means you're managing duplications of everything related to that, not just from a CAD perspective and a drawing perspective, but also from a supplier chain. If you acquire those components from the same exact suppliers, then you have just duplicate of that information inside of the system. Could be just confusing for everybody that needs that. So from an inventory standpoint, that could actually increase your cost if it's hard to track that information and manage it. And that's where, from a Windchill perspective, parts classification or parts link for the module's name, this is what it could do. It could help you easily manage reusable and consumable parts and be able to search upon them much more easily, make sure you're tracking those components. And then, of course, you have the ability inside of Windchill to understand where all of those components are being used in which products and which assemblies. So you can actually reuse and understand all of that data, and that could trickle down to your supply chain and inventory. From a capabilities perspective, first of all, searching. You don't have to worry about searching. First of all, searching is easy inside of Windchill. You can, the typical methods is searching by names, by parts. You can do wildcard searches, so just searching partial names of things. But with parts classification or parts link, we evolve that to be much more advanced. When you're classifying components, you're not just classifying something as a specific type of object, but you can actually add attributes. So let's say the diameter of certain fasteners, their length, the material that are being used. You can classify based suppliers too, which suppliers providing that information. So you can classify really on any sort of attributes that you would need and create yourself a catalog of electrical components, of mechanical components, of even documents too. It doesn't just have to be on parts, it could be on documents as well, and document structures. So you can create a structure that could encompass both parts and documents. You can create two separate ones for that. And then you can start classifying them by the type, by what they are as components, their measurements. So you can create yourself that catalog, and you always have a single point of access to that data. Everybody will be able to have access to it. You can think of it as a main library for yourself inside of Windchill, where if you're assembling parts in an assembly and you're looking for fasteners, you would go into the fastener library. So in this case, the uh, area in the classification where you have your fasteners classified, and then you can go and select based on the proper measurements and attributes that you want to have for this itself. It's flexible too, so you can be as flexible as you need to be with it and tailor it to make sense to the way that you work and the way that you want to standardize across your organization. One of the important parts of this is you want to assign objects different attributes based on the type of object that it is. So the attributes for a capacitor, for example, are going to be different than the attributes for a screw. There might be some similarities, in which case you could reuse attributes and propagate them, but it's going to be a bit different. So you're going to have different changes and different nuances to the way the attributes are going to be built in. And you as a company are going to come into agreement as how you want to standardize bringing in that information into the system. Everybody is, once they, let's say, you are supplied specific fasteners, you are going to put them into the system from a CAD perspective, but also from just an object perspective. You're going to go through all of the different menus that you as a company are going to agree to. So you are standardizing across the way that this library or this catalog is being created. And what this does, the reason as to why you would do that is because it helps from a reuse standpoint and from a searchability standpoint. From reuse, you can go and easily filter through the different components and find them out easily and decide if they are applicable to the current product that you are going to work on or multiple products that you're working on. And from a searchability perspective, you can search based on similar objects based on those attributes. So let's say that in my case, I might be searching for a rivet, like in this example we're seeing right here. I might know the general area or the general range of the diameter of that rivet and its thickness and the head type that I want. I might not have nailed it down yet, or I don't know if there is even one for the specific specifications that I have in the system. I don't have to just search for one singular type of attribute that is very specific. I could search based on a range and find similar objects with similar attributes and or within a specific range that I set for it. And then those might still be applicable for me. They might help from the sense of if I'm searching within a specific range that is still applicable and those components are going to fit together, maybe the component that I found within that range might be cheaper to purchase. So I might be considering that from that sort of aspect of things. And then I can compare. I might compare the one that I specifically want versus the one that I found within that range or the multiple that I found for the ranges. And then I could choose, okay, maybe I am considering material weight, maybe I am considering the cost of this, the supplier for this, specific dimensions that I have. I can compare and contrast and then properly decide on which one is the most optimum one to use in the assembly. From a document perspective, it's very similar as well to parts. For documents, you could classify documents by types. So you could have something like a quality documentation for inspections, manuals, guides, any general type of documentation that you have, data sheets. So from a regulatory standpoint and a quality standpoint, you could have certain ones for APQP, PPAP, any of that sort of thing. And those could be either templates or they could be actual documentation that go into every product. So you can classify based on that and create your own structure, and their attributes as well apply here. So you can have different attributes for each type of document that you have. And this helps from a searching aspect because with the classification, you can index search. which what this does is it actually helps you go in and search inside of the document, the content of that document, and then you can reveal not just the title, but certain subtitles in the documentation, certain attributes that you have. So this will help you find those out easily throughout. Okay, let me pause here for a sec. I don't see any questions in the chat. Rob, is there anything else
No
I'm missing?
questions at this time.
Okay. And feel free to put them in the Q&A, by the way, as I go through this. Want to make sure we're answering those before we end the webinar. So let's switch over to Windchill and take a look at just how this looks like fully implemented in the system. For everybody familiar with Windchill or also not familiar with Windchill, this is what the system looks like. So you can manage different products, as I'm sure most of you are familiar on this call. You can manage different products, you can manage documentation, CAD drawings, and really anything around the product inside of the system. Now, once you have the data in, this is where you might go in and either you are encountering issues with finding products and making sure that you are properly reusing the information, or you just want to make sure that the data is congregated in a way that makes sense and is standardized across. From a parts link perspective or from a parts classification perspective, there's different searching methods. I'm going to start with the basic Windchill methods and then show you how classification is added to that. So right here, we can search by type of information. The first box that you see with all the different types, this is just basic Windchill capabilities. There's different object types that you have stored in the system, and you can search based on that. Now, where parts classification comes in is specifically for the part types and for the document types. Those are the two types of objects that we can classify inside of the system. And you can see once I just unfiltered through everything and just left the part, that added that box for classification at the bottom is because I already have components classified. So what I could do is I could search based on the parts or on the documents classifications. I have two structures for those built in, but I could add in different keywords if I wanted to. So those could be keywords around the attributes or around the content of the parts, or I could just go to the classification explorer itself. This is the catalog that I was talking about that you could go in and filter down through that. It's as if you have folders of different parts or documents and they all have a hierarchy. Same thing right here. There's a structure that has a hierarchy that you can go and drill down into different objects that you have. And in my case, there's not that many objects. There's around just 305 parts. Those are classified based on types and subtypes. Around that, you might have a much more fleshed out structure with different types of components, depending on the product that you have. But this could be what it looks like. So in my case, from a mechanical standpoint, I have different subtypes of mechanical parts. Bearings, bolts, clamps, nuts, and so on. And even those have information contained within them. I could go from the left-hand side with the structure tree, or I could drill down from the middle of the screen, which you see over here, going into those different folders. If we go in the electrical components, we have different types of electrical components. As you see, components, boards, connectors, I might just have those fleshed out that way. And then I might have one individual type of part in that folder, or I might have multiple in that, but it just depends on how much information you really have inside of the system. But this could let you drill down into specific types of objects that you are looking for. So it's easy to search for. And then once you, let's say, figure out we are in the Revit realm of things and we're searching based on that, you could still go in and dig deeper into those. If you have, even with the rivets, I just have what, 6 results right here, 7 of them, I think. You might have way more than that. Even if you drill down into rivets, you might have, I don't know, 50 to 100 different rivet types that you are working. Now, where do we go from there? This is where the additional searching is possible based on the attributes. So those attributes show up as columns based on the objects. We have multiple. We have based on sourcing type. We have materials. Now, the sourcing type is not necessarily an attribute from classification. This is coming into play with one of the other modules that we have inside of Windchill called supplier management. So we are actually looping in who are the vendors and the suppliers that we have that are going to give us that specific component. So this is why the status is there. But from an attributes perspective for classification, we have material, head type, diameter, the thickness of the material, length, and then where it is as far as like storage classification. So those are some simple attributes you could have. You could have a lot more than that if needed, but you could start drilling down and refining your results from there. So we can go from a type parts, going back to that top level general Windchill searching capability mechanical type, and then drilling down into the classification stuff with the type of rivet that it has, who created it, the type of material. So these are the attributes that are actually matched to that type of object that we have. In our case, because we're looking at rivet, is it's going to add all of those properties or all of those attributes that we have for rivets on the left hand side, so we can actually search based on those. And those are just picking and choosing onto objects. You can add ranges, you can add specific values for things. Like for my case, let's say I want only the plastic ones and search based on those. I might have a couple different types of materials I might be wanting to understand. And if not, I could do the similar searching capability where in here we can go and let's say I find an object that I like. I want to know if there's other options similar to that in the system. I can click on it and then say, do similar object search. And for this rivet, we still have all of the attributes for that rivet from the classification itself. It will go through a similar process of searching, but now we can do find me similar objects based on those parameters that we're going to set. You can add the modifiers of the range of the percentage of how different they could be. And those could be small increments of differences. They don't have to be like a range from, I don't know, 1 millimeter to 7 millimeters. It could be like a 1.1 to a 1.2 difference. So this is just around similar searching. And then once you do that, you can compare those objects together and figure that out. Now, how do we create a part with the classification? There is a bit from a back end perspective that needs to happen to build out the structure and the attributes for the parts and the documents. But from a front end perspective, as a user, once all of those have been set, let's say I want to create a part and a folder and just classify it within the library. It's just a matter of going into Windchill, creating the part itself, specifying the object type. This is up until now just general Windchill check-in or creation capabilities. Now, what gets added to that is after we name and number the part, we're just going to do something simple for the demo. What gets added to that is this part's classification. So this is where we go into that structure that was built to us from the back end of things or from an admin perspective. And we go and classify that part into the different types or the different nodes that are available for us. Let's say we want to go and add a new one for the rivets. We have a few options right here. I just want the blind rivet. And then once that happens, it reveals in the next stage the attributes that we need to fill out for it to be properly classified. And from like a permission standpoint, admins could require this upon the creation. So ensuring that all users put in those attributes, they can require certain attributes. If you like have a minimum requirement, if you need to at least fill those out for it to be classified, you can also work around that. This is just from a backend perspective and how you want to set this up. But it's just a matter of going in and choosing the options that are available. So you can do selectable ranges, you could enter in metrics and making sure that you're entering them in the proper units, not to mix units as much as possible in the system. But those are the attributes for the parts. And then once that is done, it's just an object in Windchill. So we added that object, it's now classified. We can go in and search on it and then find it throughout. So if we have this go in, so see in the searches right here, it just added to that to the rivet types objects. And then just to show you from like an admin or a backend perspective, this is the sort of view that you have. You're just going in and creating notes for the types that you want to have for the catalog. And then you can add in images, you can add in certain keywords that you want to bring in and search based upon. You can have attributes. So this is where the attributes get brought in. So from an admin perspective, they come in and bring those in, and they could be reusable attributes. So those attributes could be shared across different items in the system, or they could just be individual attributes just specific to that object type. So this is where you create it from a backend perspective. You would just go in, add a new node, choose if this is a selectable option upon creation, add the attributes to it, and then be good to go. Now, finally, just to show you from a document perspective how that looks like as well, because I know I focused a bit more on the parts side of things. Similar to how you have a parts structure, you have a document classification structure. And this is very similar. Same thing from the backend perspective as well to how you create parts, you create nodes, structure that, and then add the attributes to it. But just for the sake of showing that, I have two types of main documents around general information and quality. You can drill down into like data sheets, department documents, different manuals that you have around products. And then it's the same thing again. You can create as many levels as necessary and then search based on that and then refine those searches based on that. So let's go back into my presentation. From a Windchill perspective and why parts classification was really created, it's to help improve productivity. Once you have data into the system and you're scaling your business, you're trying to cut down on searching time spending creating new parts and documents, and just cutting down on time to market, really. You're able to do that with parts classification. It's so easy to use. You're able to, as a user, not necessarily have to browse through so much data and legacy information to find what it is that you need. And then from a complexity standpoint, as well of just the data that you have inside of the system, it reduces that number. You're only working along with the classification of parts. Now, not all parts need to be classified, but for the majority of it, especially the reusable ones, the consumable ones, those could be reduced as far as quantities goes. You can narrow down which ones you're using from specific suppliers. You can increase the quality of your product as well from the aspect of, is this the best component that we're going to have for that product? Is it going to get to us on time or before that? Are we going to make sure we're meeting deadlines? And then from an inventory cost as well, you can start trimming down on that inventory and make sure you're controlling that as much as possible. So that's parts classification.
Yeah, these duplicate parts, I did a search on the internet, and it could cost somewhere around $4,500 to $7,500. Sometimes it could cost more, and those costs where it's just having that inventory. It's the time it takes for people to find those parts, the time it takes for engineering to make a duplicate part because they don't think they have the right one or whatever. And that's exactly what parts classification does, in Windchill. So if it's going to cost an average annually on an average like $4,000 to be a conservative number, and you have say 20 duplicate parts, when you do that math, that's $80,000 a year. So there's a lot of money that can be saved based on if you're a larger company, you have more parts, you might have more duplicates. So this is absolutely a solution that can help save money and give you a return on investment rather quickly. So Andrea, thank you very much for leading the webinar today. I will be sending out the recording to all registrants probably by the end of the day today. So thanks again, everyone. And thank you, Andrea. Have a great day.